Yeah, I was so shocked when I'm watching my Netflix and I'm feeling pretty good. I don't feel I have to channel anything through Facebook Reels. I don't have to listen to music. I don't even have to go to sleep to calm down the heart palpitations. So when I'm watching Netflix, and before I couldn't even read the writing when there was a lead in giving you kind of like the beginning, the narration, the intent of the movie, the introduction, I guess, and then I can actually read. I was able to read it like word for word. It was like, what the hell? Before I'd have to be like, okay, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but who cares? I don't know the backstory. So I'll just wait for the whole story to unfold. But no, I was able to read word for word what they were saying on that screen. Usually I'm like seeing double and able to see the season and episode and even the name of the chapter of that episode on my Netflix. And I'll tell you, the last 4 months, I was my eyes changed because I was going through another energy conversion. I was going through reliving some old trauma shit. That does change your eyes. Holy shit. So a couple of months back in February, I renewed my license and I couldn't read the DMV writing. And I'm like, before that, the year before, I was able to read it. I don't understand what happened in one freaking year, but there's a lot that went on in one freaking year. But I couldn't read the DMV license. I knew I was squinting everywhere I was going. It would be so bright. And that was right before the eclipse. And when the eclipse happened, I'm like, oh God, the sun is so this. But I didn't realize that what I was reacting to was what I held within. That's why my husband's like, what the hell is going on with her? She's fucking nuts. No. Oh no. I was going through a biochemical change. And when you go through a biochemical change, it changes your perception about everything. It's almost as if you're in a different alternate universe than those who don't have the things like that, or they haven't triggered that demon within. Why do you call it demon? Because we all have demons of trauma. It's just some people realize those demons of trauma sooner than others because they're smaller. Maybe it was already on the surface and it was just ready to let go. Other people can hold all whatever traumas, and whatever traumas they did have, it wasn't so bad that it, causes dizziness and vertigo and all that stuff. So it was extraordinary last night. After all this arm pain and stuff, oh my God. And that was from a trauma of damaging my arm through a gate because of some stupid choice I made way back when. After dealing with that arm trauma and even seeing the demons in my sleep and dreaming about them as they're leaving the body, wow. Then my vision comes back. I have mental clarity. People of the past are like knocking on the door, not literally, but I did get in contact with someone I haven't talked to in a long ass time. And I kind of know where now people are out there. I know where my parents are now, but that's fine. I'm not going into too much of that. But yeah, it was kind of interesting that the past is like knocking. Past will always come knocking. That's what pain and suffering is. Your children are the past knocking, telling you you've made a fucked up mistake. Now you got to relive your mistake in your children. You got to relive all this. And you hope the children can correct. But if they're procreate on bodies in deficit, they're not going to correct the mistakes. They'll kind of repeat it, and you'll play that game of raising them in this society and hope they become a really good contributing member of society for whatever life they have. But yeah, cancer, disease, chronic illness, autoimmune disorders, your children, pain and suffering, like literally pain and suffering are the past knocking on your door saying, okay, this is the time to make a choice, correct the mistakes your ancestors made, or keep repeating the mistakes. And when people take cures and they do remedies and they're getting their surgeries and they're having children and they're getting lost in addiction and they're all about sexuality, yeah, they're repeating the mistakes of their ancestors. And then they will develop offspring from that, whether it's a virus, whether it's a baby, whether it's cancer, whether it's disease, whether it's a crazy aging process that will cause a person to want to be even more cured because it's so painful to age. Because your body breaking down from all of your experiences, developing offspring who are eating away at your infrastructure. That's why people decline and break apart in their body, and also why friendships also go to the wayside, because they run their course. It runs its course. That's why you've been seeing me talk about friendships, talk about relationships, talk about, God, if you really want to save yourself, if you can even handle the pain and suffering, you'd really have to let your relationships run their course, and maybe even get out before it runs its course, because maybe those relationships are killing you. Maybe you're not strong enough for relationships that you are cultivating. And so I feel at the gut level, and I've experienced everything that I've been talking about, but articulating in a way that makes sense to people out there who are in a completely different world. It's been a challenge, but it's becoming whole. It's like, it's becoming whole. I'm not saying you have to become whole, but that's exactly what I've been doing with the last 8 years, and then even more so the last 3-4 years. And so, wow, what the heck? Okay. That's too funny. What is, okay. Meta. Why is Meta putting, like, jeez. Meta puts even ads on your own damn Facebook. What the heck, Meta? Okay, so I said, have we become the bastards of 10,000 maniacs? Why did I say that? Because I was thinking about Freddy Krueger. Freddy Krueger's backstory. And I knew that the slasher movies were lessons to us if we could only figure out the bigger picture. And sometimes the system gives us lessons that we'll never understand because we're not there yet. Some people will never get there, but I figured out that the slasher movies that I was never exposed to, they were lessons. They were major lessons of what happens when people procreate on bodies in deficit, along with violence and gore and brutality, and then also even the pharmaceuticals that will develop a certain type of adrenaline. And then, of course, the images that people are exposed to as a young child will develop serial killers, as well as even the overprotection of these mothers when the child comes out just a little deformed, and so they don't get socialized. They don't know how to defend themselves when people are making fun of them or hurting them or making eyes at them. I mean, I felt everything about about the people around me when I'm doing whatever I'm doing back in California, and people are making eyes at me and telling me like, "Oh, you're stupid." They don't say I'm stupid, but they'll be like, give me weird looks. And then some people make comments. Oh, some people will kick you. Some people will kick your ass. Some people will just psychologically fuck with you. And so when you overprotect someone from that, then of course they won't be able to handle dealing with a very cruel world, cruel children. Oh yeah. They won't be able to handle their peers who can be so cruel. And so what happens is that when they do finally get out there in the world and experience how cruel their peers can be, they don't survive their peers. They actually become the very thing their peers were to them. They mirror back exactly what was done to them. They don't know how to release the demons. They don't know how to deal with stress. And so a lot of these guys, these very weak men who were overprotected by their mother, when they get a taste of the real world, they don't come back from the real world. They become violent because they can't handle the stress of a breakup. They can't handle the stress of a firing. They can't handle the stress of cancer, disease, and chronic illness. And so that's what we've developed. We've developed serial killers. We've developed Freddy Krueger type people. The bastards of 10,000 maniacs. Why the bastard 10,000 maniacs? Because Freddy Krueger's mother was a nun in an insane asylum that she was locked in overnight by mistake, and all the security were gone for Christmas weekend. So she was locked in there for many hours, brutalized by all these psychopaths. And then she had a baby from that. That baby became a fucking psychopath. That was Freddy Krueger. Michael Myers has a Halloween. He was made fun of. And then Jason Voorhees, Friday the 13th, these are all depictions of what we produce in our society when we don't understand the power of developing life. We don't understand the power of violence on a child's psyche at a young age. Yeah, I'm not doing the whole high shit. Sorry. But I'm not here to talk to people. Okay? I don't need high. Sorry, people got to understand. This is not a place to pick up on me or anything. You got to listen. Gosh. Why aren't you so patient, Julian? Because the reason why I don't deal with people that just like go high on these streams, because they're people from third world countries with fake accounts that have fake profile pictures because they want to feel a part of things, but they just don't. Yeah, my information is not really for third world countries because they have a long way to go to understand where I'm coming from. Like a long way to go. Some get it and they keep to themselves and they know their boundaries. Others are like want to go in and they just can't. I don't know. But Jillian, you're on live and you're open. Well. Some people will figure it out. Some people will just go and insert themselves, like literally insert themselves into a situation. I don't need to be high. I don't need to say hi to a stranger. If a stranger wants to say hi to you, yeah, they're trying to get in. You don't want to be that easy for people to get in. Oh, but you're so unkind. Yeah. I don't play that fucking shit. So anyways, yeah, so Freddy Krueger, we develop those kinds of people in our world because we procreate on bodies in deficit. We procreate on bodies in deficit and we don't really take life seriously. And a lot of women don't take life seriously. I mean, they were told by their family, oh, you should have a family. You should have a baby. You should be like us and have children. Yeah, what kind of children are you raising in our society? Are you raising weak boys that when they get with a girl and she's just like, yeah, I don't want to be with you? Are you raising a boy that can't handle rejection? Are you raising a boy that can't handle pain and suffering? Are you raising a boy that's so sensitive that when he gets hurt, he becomes brutal to somebody? What kind of boys are you raising? What kind of girls are you raising? And so just because you can have a baby doesn't mean you're giving us the world anything, awesome to deal with. You may be giving us a headache. Okay? And so becoming whole is painful. And I was lucky enough to not have all my diseases, even as a kid, treated so harshly. Because I didn't have any major diseases. I just had malnutrition. It was getting used to the food supply. Those were my stomach aches. Those were my nosebleeds. It was constantly assimilating to the environment around me. I had to keep getting my nose cauterized, yes. And maybe, when you have the allergies, okay, so I had the Triaminic, the Claritin, because of the hay fever. It was so crazy. But that was pretty much it. I wasn't on any kind of ADD medication. I wasn't on any drug therapy, literally. It was just seasonal stuff. And so I got lucky that I had straight teeth. I was lucky I didn't have to get braces. I was lucky I didn't have to get any operations. I mean, I sprained my ankle, so they taped it up. But that's pretty much it. But what I really needed to deal with and face was getting used to the food supply. That was my biggest pain and suffering, was assimilating to the food supply. So when you're starving, trying to assimilate to the food supply, oh gosh, it's painful. It is painful. And even then, I don't even know what that meant, right? Of course you wouldn't at that many years old. So it took 50 years and the whole J world to understand the pain and suffering is, yes, transitioning back onto the food supply without mischaracterizing the symptoms and learning how to deal with the symptoms and eat the food and stay home and stay safe, which was the last 3 years, and rest and relax and not think that the food is poison. It's not. It was my own deficiencies. And then whatever traumas that I dealt with and even forgot the last 30 years. Okay? Holy crap, they do come to surface, and they're painful. And they're freaking painful. Holy crap. They are freaking painful. Oh, wow. And so becoming whole is painful. All of us are fractions of what our whole potential could be, and then we keep evolving as the world changes. Okay, so I'm just going to read this. I don't care. Our children, our pain, suffering, cancer, disease, chronic illness, and disorders are the reminders of the mistakes we once made and must relive them over and over and over again until the system stops the bleeding or until we learn our lessons. Well, have you heard of anyone really being immortal? No. You hear people say, oh yeah, this guy's immortal. Oh, this person's like 120 years old. Look. I mean, they look decrepit. They look like they were dug out of the ground and given a little bit of life. They look like a mummy. Immortality isn't looking like an old man. You would never know who is immortal in your society unless you knew their background, unless you saw their driver's license, unless you were the government. Because let me tell you, if I'm like this, which I will be, 50 years from now, people around me who I bury or whatever wouldn't be around. Only my government would know I existed. And maybe people, out there that heard about me, that maybe they're like, 12 or 13 years old. They're like, wow, she looks great. My parents died and she's still around and she's like 80 years old and she looks 50. She looks 40 or whatever it is. And then they maybe, potentially everyone around me, even the kids that know me, would not be around. Only my government would know. So you would never know who is immortal. And they wouldn't look like somebody freaking old. They wouldn't look like someone falling apart. They wouldn't look like someone living on supplements and detoxes and diets. They would know how to assimilate to the food supply. The government pyramid of food is the correct diet, so to speak. There's people like, oh, I can't do gluten-free. I have to do gluten-free, and I have to be meat-free and milk-free and vegan and vegetarian and do all these freaking liver detoxes. And that is a person that's not going to last very long in our society. They'll have a little bit of life left in them, but at some point, the body's going to deteriorate from all that starvation. So you would never know who immortal people are. And they're not someone that looks like that they are 90 or 100 years old. I mean, it's nice that they lasted that long and they have a lot of history to impart, assuming they have all their faculties. But immortality doesn't look like Moses, okay? He might be a representation, or not a representation. He might be like I don't know, what would you call them? An avatar? Something that I guess it could be a representation, but not an actual correct depiction. I think those that could live to be 150 potentially would be those in Africa, because they weren't so innovated upon with all of the procreation and all the remedies and all the different, modern medicine and the surgeries and stuff. And so maybe indigenous people in Africa and other places, maybe even India, Philippines or other places in third world countries, Peru, might have somebody that could live to be 150 as this world is changing. But those in America, we've been so heavily innovated upon that, yeah, the lifespans between, 60 to 80 to 100, but now people are dying suddenly. So, but those that were born in the 1940s, 1950s, 1940s, silent gens, they're getting up there. Boomers, they're getting up there. Some might hold out for a while, but boomers, yeah. It's becoming quite interesting watching everything happen. But, and so all of us are fractions of what our whole potential could be, and then we keep evolving as the world changes. Our children, our pain, suffering, cancer, disease, chronic illness, and disorders are the reminders of the mistakes we once made and must relive them over and over and over again until the system stops the bleeding. That's called climate change. That's called the Georgia Guidestones. Every single time I felt the pain the last 8 years, the last 3 years, even more so, and then the last 50 years was a reminder of ancestral pain and suffering that I needed to correct. So even though my mom, did things a little bit unorthodox, that was great. I got in touch with everything I needed to get in touch with, and then learned how to deal with it. And so I surmise we were given at least 50 years to make our mark in history and biology, and someone behind us and people ahead of us will learn from the lessons we offer to the world. Some of us learn 20 lessons out of 2,000 lessons, and others learn one lesson out of 600. Someone is taking notes from those lessons and recording them somewhere. Scientists are. The government is. I'm such a paranoid that when I get a visit from the police because of something going on in my neighborhood, I'm just like, oh, are they checking up on me? Or are they wondering if I'm, who the hell knows? I don't know anything nowadays. I don't know even what I dealt with in the past, people that I hung out with, people that I got in contact with through the internet, through whatever. Were they government plants? Were they used as a tool? I don't freaking know anything. You don't know what's real or not. You don't know what's contrived. You don't know what goes on behind closed doors. You don't know what people are used for. You don't know what goes on behind the curtain. You don't know anything. But you survive the lessons that are given to you. You survive the lessons that you come upon. You survive your friends and family, obviously, but you survive whatever choices you've made. And you never know if they are contrived, if they were something. You don't know anything. And so that's the thing. It doesn't matter if you know if it's organic or synthetic. Can you survive it? And so I learned a major lesson in the last 5 months. The demon of the trauma buries itself deep into the recesses of your body, mind, and spirit. It is not always your parents or inheriting demons. Sometimes the demons of trauma are the choices you made after the world changed for you. A breakup, a firing, an assault. So when I got into that situation that I had to escape from, it was on the heels of a breakup in San Francisco. It fucked me up for a while, but I had to learn how to deal with that. That was a situation that I had to learn how to deal with, and I went off the deep end a little bit. And I'll tell you, it was a little bit crazy because I had an expectation. And when we're raising kids that have these certain expectations around a person, place, or thing, and then it gets taken away, how do you deal with that type of situation? What do you do when your life changes and you didn't expect it, or you didn't want to have your life change that? Even though you know it should have happened, you didn't want it to change because you knew what would be involved. And that's a lot to deal with. And so you had to feel the demons and experience the trauma of bad choices and survive them and never, ever go there again. You had to learn the hard lessons and face them, and sometimes, all the time, they are painful. Sometimes you bury the trauma from bad choices so deep you basically forget them. Okay, so this last round of symptoms, the last 5 months were so extraordinary, full of dizziness, fatigue, where I would go into Walmart and feel like I was about to fucking die. The anxiety was so insane, I thought Walmart was trying to kill me. Like, literally, I thought Walmart was trying to kill me. I'm telling my husband, I feel the heart palpitations going, I feel all this stuff, and I'm like, oh my God. I couldn't freaking handle it. But I still stuck with it. But it was like I was so just running off the mouth. And my husband's like, what the fuck is going on with you? But I was reliving the trauma of what my adrenaline should have done what I was reliving at the time when I was going through whatever I was going through. Running, arm pain. Oh my God. And so the last round of symptoms, the last 5 months were so extraordinary. Full of dizziness, fatigue, and heart palpitations, neck pain, arm pain, back pain, wrist pain, finger pain, mostly localized here because of going through that gate. And anxiety. Oh my God, the anxiety. That was what you were supposed to feel at the time of the trauma, and face it and then repair it. But we don't do that, okay? We weren't told that in our society. We cure the trauma in our body. We starve it. We carve it out until later we get a delayed reaction to what we should have felt 20 years ago. And those are all the diagnosable symptoms. The rheumatoid arthritis, all the different osteoarthritis, the body breaking down, the anxiety, the anger, the crying episodes, the feeling of dizziness, the headaches. Holy crap. Yeah. What your friends and family are experiencing right now during this climate change are all the mistakes we've ever made, and we never healed from them, really, and we never dealt with them properly, the way that would support life. And so, wow, you are memories. You are memories. Many 9/11 and good memories. I never realized how much those memories of trauma from my own bad choices get filtered through my perceptions, my politics, religion, or beliefs, and science practices. And so if I were to have a kid, oh my gosh, who knows what kind of kid I would have had. So you can imagine, so with Freddy Krueger and that nun getting raped by that many insane people in that insane asylum, and you think about what happened with Epstein, Weinstein, R. Kelly, P. Diddy, and these girls who have been brutalized by these men, allegedly. Some were actually convicted. And then they go and have families on top of that. Yeah, it's like developing little Freddy Kruegers, little Chuckies, little, I don't know, Children of the Corn, right? And so I am so glad I did not have kids. If you don't learn your lessons from this lifetime, the children or someone who picked up your microbes will have to learn the lessons you never learned. And if they don't learn the lessons, someone else will pick up where they left off, and on and on and on. And that's the whole heaven and hell from Black Sabbath. Sing me a song, you're a singer. You know, and that is about heaven and hell, you know. That's what we produce, a heaven and a hell, a heaven and a hell. The angel of illusion, the devil of reality. That's all the allegory. That's the as above, so below. That is religion. That's absolution. That's ways to place all your anxiety, filter your anxiety through the scripture, and then people spout them off all over Facebook, which I understand. So the generation of diseases are people who never learn their lessons, and they keep repeating them and shape-shifting them and even evolving their mistakes. That's why you don't encourage people around you to have children, because you're only going to destroy them with your traditions and beliefs, but you can't tell people that. So you let them do what they do. And some people have, you know, a lot to them. And so they'll have kids, or kids will have kids, and then we got to deal with these kids who probably are not going to be purposed for anything, really. There'll be something the system has to deal with at some point. They're going to have neurological issues. They're going to have cognitive issues. They're going to have even emotional issues and other issues. And the system is going to have to watch them, because they know what these people are developing. They know what's in their background. They know what society is. And with these energy conversions and climate change, it's only going to bring up the demons, and some of these kids won't even survive. You hope they do. You want them to have a good life. But, I mean, they're coming from people who've already had mistakes that were never corrected. So I completely understand why the left was correct about Planned Parenthood. Life is great, right? But what kind of life are you cultivating, and what kind of suffering are you inducing? And you'll see in third world countries, some people save lives, but the person is basically a vegetable. There was this one Facebook reel where this lady, she was saved as a baby, and her head is like 50 times bigger than her body. She can't really walk around because her head is so heavy. So all she could do is just lay down and let somebody basically wipe her ass, feed her, and let her sleep. She has no life. She's basically a vegetable. She's just laying down like people want to do a hybrid where they hybridize a human into an animal that can't move, like a I don't know, some kind of gelatinous blob, but they put human life in a gelatinous blob. So you can only imagine when you can't walk, you can't even take care of yourself. You're sitting in your own urine and feces, but you're conscious. It's like someone who has ALS. They're conscious, but they can't move their arms. So they're sitting in this world where they can't move. How is that a fucking life? But people are like, oh yeah, we're all about anti-abortion, and we're going to have 1 billion fucking kids. These kids are suffering. But we have to see it, because remember, people get lost in their beliefs, right? So you'll see people develop serial killers out there because they value life so much they even develop someone who is a destroyer. How many men are told to go beat up each other? How many men are told to go and conquer a bunch of women? Just look at some of these reality shows of men and women who are hot chicks and hot guys just out there to screw everything. And they could get with someone who will destroy them, but you can't tell them anything, right? Because they're hot chicks and hot guys. That's all they know. It's hot chick, hot guy shit. I could never say what I went through the last 8 years, and even more so the last 3 years, someone else could go through, because you can only imagine what kind of surgery and trauma people have buried deep within the recesses of their body, mind, and spirit, hold within. And that is a Pandora's box some people don't want to open. So every time I release demons and I open up both sides of my immune system, yeah, it takes that. So sometimes it's like in the middle of the day. Sometimes you'll feel that arm pain, leg pain, and pressure, and you got to figure out how to relieve that pressure without trying to harm somebody else or yourself. You have to eat food. You have to sleep. Sometimes, that's why I was eating so much spaghetti, because that was the gluten, that was the sugar that's rebuilding my DNA ladders. Because that's what your DNA ladders are. It's the glucose, and then you have the amino acids and the hydrogen bonds. That's your Gattaca. That's your, your adenine, thymine, whatever. Gosh, I don't remember all the names of it. But then you have the uracil, which is your evolution. That's the RNA. So you have the DNA and the RNA, the evolution, and then you have to go and rebuild, release. And it is a systematic process that you don't even want to be out there in public, because someone could trigger another freaking memory that you have to relive. That's exactly what I've been feeling the last 3 years, was reliving every single memory that I don't even know where the hell they came from. It could have been from all the colloidal silver and the garlic oil and all the pills and the powder supplements, and even being around people that were not good for me, or, the alcohol or the drugs. I mean, you never know what kind of trauma you've done to your body until you have to relive that pain and suffering later on. But then they call it disease. They call it rheumatoid arthritis. They call it lupus. They call it Parkinson's. They call it fibromyalgia. They call it ALS. They call it all these different diseases. But yeah, that's the body trying to correct itself. And that's the body reacting from all the trauma you ever done to it, even in the surgical system. That's what pain and suffering is lessons you never learned that you're going to have to keep repeating or until you die, or your kids are going to have to inherit those lessons, and you hope they survive the lessons that you never learned. And so, oh my God, yeah, I didn't realize that my shoulder was injured back then 20 years ago, but I didn't have the tools to repair it, so my body just temporarily healed it. I don't even remember if I took any kind of drugs to deal with any of the pain. I think I was on adrenaline that time. But the real healing is painful. So that's probably what all the anxiety is, the adrenaline that I should have felt at that, or what I felt that time, reliving that. But then also, I should have repaired that, but I didn't have the means to. Because if I was trying to repair this, then everything else in my body had to be repaired, and the body wasn't ready to go through that kind of trauma, that memory. So it's like a dissociation, but not really. You're not like a Sybil. I mean, I put those articles out there so you understood the extreme side of dissociation and burying trauma, and then having weird personalities come out when they get triggered. But when you do deal with certain types of traumas, like war trauma, boyfriend trauma, situation trauma, then the body does cordon it off. The body does separate itself from that and puts that somewhere. And then one day when all the conditions are right, it comes out in disease, and it comes out in dreams, comes out in memories, it comes out in just weird behaviors. And the person even changes, like even this environment, people are reliving trauma and they don't want to relive it, but that's why you're seeing changes in people during climate change. Because of the trauma within, and yeah, they're taking in things that activate it, which are the public health therapies that have its own trauma, because it's the population's microbes that you're dealing with now that are waking up the demons within. And are you going to survive your own trauma plus the triggers in your environment? And that's the diet suddenly when people cannot handle the memories of what they have within, as well as somebody else's memories through the public health therapies that have been purified, so they're not poison. But that's what we're experiencing right now. People cannot handle the memories in their genetic line, regardless of the catalyst, because people are not even getting the public health therapies, and they are not surviving, or they are experiencing different diagnosable conditions. They're like, well, I don't understand. I never thought the V's. I don't hang with anybody really, and I'm feeling this and feeling that. Yeah, it's the memories that you've never faced, that you've always, pushed under the rug, or partied away, or used drugs to, disable your symptoms, or you carved it out with the surgery. And so the real healing is the aging process that people respond to ineffectively. And so they destroy themselves with starvation in operations, then die suddenly. But again, you can't make people feel pain and suffering. You don't know what's in their background as far as the trauma, the surgeries, the pills, the drug therapies, even the psychedelics and whatever else. Because, you know, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, people were doing so much blow. They were doing so much pot. They were doing so many things, getting in fights or playing sports, doing stupid shit. You know how men do stupid shit. You know, the men that do football and boxing and karate and all that, they're getting hit left and right by their opponent. Can you imagine when they actually want to become whole again? Every single time they have to relive a memory of somebody hitting them because they were voluntarily playing football. They voluntarily went into a boxing match. They voluntarily got into a fight with somebody at the bar because they were dealing with something. You're going to have to relive that trauma. That's some fucking crazy shit. And so innately I knew to, you know, I mean, I might have walked into really stupid situations, but I didn't get into too many fights. I walked away from things that I knew that eventually it would hurt me. I didn't get so brave that I want to go and kick somebody's ass because I'd have to relive that pain later on of somebody hurting me or me hurting somebody else. And there was no way I was going to do that. And so, but not everybody can handle pain and suffering. So there must be some way to humanely keep them relatively pain-free while they raise their children and survive the body they were given. Because again, not everybody can do what I can do. I mean, I want people to do what I can do, but let me tell you, the last 5 freaking months, it was crazy. Like, I didn't even know what the hell was going on. Walking into that Walmart, I really thought Walmart was trying to kill me. I seriously thought Walmart was trying to kill me. And people else felt the same way going into different places, but they were getting triggered because they hold that trauma within their body. And it could be a friend, a family, a person, an environment like a Walmart, high energy areas that will wake up the memories, and they're going to have to deal with it. And they can try to remedy it away, but you know how it goes when the memories come to surface. The environment's not going to let you just bury it deep down inside. Another energy is going to wake it up again. Wake it up again. Wake it up again until you treat yourself to death. That's what's going on. So climate change is, you're not getting relief. What you're getting is you either face all the fucking memories in your body, mind, and spirit and pay penance, so to speak, and change your life. There's plenty of opportunity to have delivery services and to retire if you wanted to, or pull back on your spending so you don't work yourself to death, and start facing the past. Start facing the present. But people are not doing that. They are resisting facing the demons. And so they're on their string of drugs. They're going to string of parties, bunch of friends and family. They're on their diets and alcohol and drugs and things like that. They're remedying their disease or getting it carved out. And so it's only going to be worse later when the climate changes yet again and they have to still face that demon that they kept trying to resist and trying to run away from. You can't fucking run away from the demons that you hold within. That's what I learned. Every single time I left any situation or left wherever, I still had to bring myself with me to every situation. And I had to once I finally landed somewhere with my husband, okay, then I finally had to face everything. And not mischaracterize it, but characterize it correctly. And that is difficult, characterizing things, because you want to blame someone. People want to blame things. And I understand that. And so I said back in February, I could only read double vision from letters far away, and my husband thought I was going blind, and even I got my eyes checked, by lens crafters, and they said a little bit of farsightedness or nearsightedness. I forget which one it was, but I was seeing double when I was watching my Netflix. I mean, as far as not that so much, well, sometimes it was the people, but it was the writing that I was seeing double. And I remember going into like a Walmart or wherever else in a bright place, I'd be squinting so much, squinting. Now I can go outside. I mean, I don't want to go outside and be so exposed to the sun because I don't want it to break me down, because the sun does shine a little bit differently. But I when I go to places, I don't squint. When I go to Walmart, when I go to Giant Eagle, when I go to Aldi's, or we go to a restaurant, I'm not squinting. Okay? And so, it was annoying. So even at the DMV, okay, here we go. But I was seeing double when I was watching my Netflix. I could never really read any of the writing unless I got up close. But even at the DMV, I couldn't read the writing. I kept seeing double, and I was so annoying. So even on my driver's license, it says use corrective lenses. I'm like, okay, well, I don't need to now. Well, shit, I wish I could go. I mean, maybe one day I'll go back to the DMV just for shits and giggles and see if I can read the writing. Maybe I might ask somebody. I don't know. I might do that one day. But I am getting my vision back. Maybe it's better. I don't know if it's better or not, but I'm getting my vision back. But no crazy dreams. And I go to bed a little bit later, not as early as I did. And I get up maybe a few times, but I sleep very well from like 1 or 2 in the morning until about 5, or a good 3 or 4 hours straight through. But I fall asleep around 11 or 12, maybe before that. Okay. But I mean, I fall asleep. I can actually catch myself snoring. And I'll tell you, before all of this, I used to just fall asleep. I wouldn't catch myself snoring, but I would actually now feel the layers of falling into that levels of REM. And that's a really interesting phenomenon. Okay. And so my shoulder only hurts a little bit, but not as much as it did. Like, I'm getting slowly the range of motion. I'm very clear-headed. The past seems like it was so far away. So when I had a contact with the past, it was like yesterday, but then so far away, but so near. And the people that in my conspiracy world, I'm like, are so far away, but yet so near. It's such a weird situation. It's like, like what Kamala Harris is saying. Today is yesterday. Today is tomorrow. You do changes for today, so yesterday and tomorrow look a little bit differently, and yesterday does look a little differently, and tomorrow looks very different. I mean, like, the past is so near, but yet so far, and this recent time seems so far, but yet they're so near, and I gotta pee. Darn it. Okay, and it goes on and on and on. All right, so there's that. Baby tragically dies after being born with 4 legs. This is in India. 4 arms and 2 faces. Oh, yeah. And so inflammation is when the body attempts to develop properties to release, and then you have to feed the body to repair. So when people get all of these different old people diseases because the body's attempting to try to regain another lifeline and is trying to push out the old, but people don't feed for the new because it's painful to transition. So they're told they only have one life because maybe the damage from the past life was just too much, that it'd be too much to deal with. Some people have a lot more damage in their past than others. And you can't make people feel pain, and you can't force them to eat, and you can't be so invasive to try to work their own immune system for them. They have to figure it out if it's worth it to even do that for themselves. And that's what arthritis is. And that's what I was feeling the last month, 2 months. And some people, they wouldn't be able to handle what I dealt with because it was literally arm pain. I could barely even move it. It was just like, oh my God, turn around, oh my gosh. And it was the forearm pain. It was the shoulder pain. It was the muscle pain. Even the lymph nodes were opening up and releasing damage and memories and shit. And then it was the forearm pain. Oh my gosh. And then it was the hand pain, and it was the finger pain. And then when I was doing dishes, trying to work through that, it was the hot water. Then I realized, oh, the hot water, yes, expanding the blood vessels to allow all that damage and memories get through and release. And so that's why it's painful for people in the cold when they have circulation issues, because they're dealing with memories that are being pushed through constricted blood vessels. And that's why they have to be in warm places, so that way their blood vessels stay open, relatively open. And that's some crazy shit, man. And I understand. I get it. And so Leonard Hayflick, anytime you have an injury or disease or a deficiency or a surgery or taken remedies or done things that require medical diagnosis or remedy, you'll have to visit twice and sometimes 3 times. And sometimes even more so when the cures wear off. I couldn't tell you how many times I had to deal with things over and over again, and as if they were new damage, old damage, because of so many things happening, clustering during the years of growing up. So if you broke an ankle and then you healed and then re-injured it again and then healed and then you decided to finally face your demons, you have to actually deal with that ankle again a third time around. So I didn't break my ankle, but I did sprain it when I was a kid, and it didn't like heal properly, but what are you going to do, right? And so then I re-injured it back in 2010 because I rolled it when I was playing soccer with some kids, and I could barely even walk. I could not even walk. So then I went to the emergency room. They got a boot. They did an x-ray and I got a boot. And so I had that boot for a while. Okay. And then my ankle healed again. But then this last 8 years, I had to relive and feel the pain in my ankle from that tearing of the ligaments, from the injuries. I had to revisit that injury. So I felt weakness in my ankles. But see, then I knew that I had to repair that. I was drinking milk and cream and ice cream. A lot of, cottage cheese, all this milk products. So it's like calcium, and then the meat, the milk, the cheese, the eggs, the fruits, the vegetables. And so I would test it. And I would gamble, yes, but I'd jump off the back of my husband's boat and land on my ankle to see if I'd shatter it. No shattering. It was strong. I've twisted my ankle because I would mop the floor and there'd be a little residual water or pine sol, and then I would slip on the floor, but I wouldn't fall. And if I did fall, I didn't hurt my ankle. Now I did on my left ankle when I was taking a dog back to its house, and the dog was like, I couldn't walk properly, and I rolled my ankle, my left ankle. It took a few months for it to heal, but it's finally healed. I don't feel any pain there. But that's the thing. Anytime you injure yourself, you literally have to feel that pain plus every other pain that you ever dealt with. So that's why people take all their different herbal remedies, because if you cure one disease and you put that back in every other disease that happens, or any kind of injury that happens, yeah, the body might be able to repair itself, but it's only temporary. You start breaking down. One day you're going to have to face every single mistake. That's what retirement is. When you're on all these drugs and surgeries, when you're retired, or when you get diagnoses, those are all the mistakes that you never corrected. Those are all the mistakes you've made that you never corrected, really. And that's like Judgment Day. That's Revelations. That's the Bible right there. Cancer, disease, chronic illness, autoimmune disorders are basically Revelations, Armageddon, and Judgment Day. Now go look at your Facebook. You see all people who are about the Bible talking about the end of times and everything. Yeah, the end of times is basically your own demise. Yeah, you know exactly what you're in for, because you can feel it, because you are going down that road of end times in your own body. So when you injure your shoulder, well, you're dealing with an injury, and then you get surgery, then you must deal with that. Plus then later on, if the cure wears off, then you have an aching. You then take more medication because there's arthritis and other diseases, because the body is trying to heal from past injuries. And people take medication for arthritis and it holds over for a minute, but then the medication gets recalled because it's not effective anymore, and then the pain returns. That's what happens when the wind blows. People are like going back in and out of the hospital. You know why? Because every single time they went to the hospital, they got another cure, another surgery, another remedy. Well, that's not going to take, and so they go back to the hospital again when the wind blows differently again. And that's what you're watching, is the demise and the decline and the torture of people, because they don't know how to correct the mistakes. They don't have the capacity to. So they just hope that in between each change in the climate, that the cures are given to them last enough for them to give them some respite until the next change of wind. And so the injury and the diseases was the first mistake, and then one should never have to revisit those mistakes, but we do, because we don't deal with them effectively and we don't learn from our mistakes. And so we will keep repeating the same mistakes until we learn our lessons, and that includes the pain of suffering. And sometimes our children are the lessons of the mistakes that we made in the past. That's what disease is. That's what pain and suffering is. Those are the lessons of the past calling to you, letting you know there are still lessons to learn and you haven't learned them yet. Infertility is when the system decides to learn from their mistakes of breeding people who keep breeding people, or your body learn from your mistakes, and either you will live or you will die from the lessons. And so the whole thing with the J world is living from the lessons of mistakes of the past. And some people out there who are dying suddenly are dying from the lessons from the mistakes of the past. And sometimes children are paying for the sins of their father and mother. And so they don't survive climate change. I know people have spiritual beliefs around children and family, and I'm not trying to offend anyone, but there is a bigger picture going on in a far more spiritual situation that's presented before us that I couldn't even begin to impart upon people who might have a different belief system. And that's okay. We have 50 years to make your mistakes and correct them. So that way the next 50 years, right, you might have a better chance in surviving your world, especially when the world changes. So that's the whole Hayflick limit. So Henrietta Lacks proved that we have immortalized germline cells, and that was the cancers, because they took samples of her cancer, her ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, and they did all the experiments and found that, yes, that was an immortalized germline cell. And it's not just her and her family, it's everybody has immortalized germline cells, but we don't know how to develop and transition from one immortalized downline of germline cells, one MLM, to then another MLM, multi-level marketing. Why I call it multi-level marketing? Because you have one upline that is like the immortalized germline cell. Then you have all these little somatic cells that can redouble itself 50 times over. But then it must, once it redoubles itself 50 times over, that's Leonard Hayflick's discovery, then it must transition over to the next immortalized germline cell to then redouble itself 50 times over. And that is immortality, is constantly transitioning from one immortalized downline of germline cells to another one, to another one, to another one. And that's based upon the lifestyle, the culture, and the whole society that you live in. Okay? And so you have 50 years to make your mistakes and correct them. So that way the next 50 years you might have a better chance in surviving your world, especially when the world changes. I was given the chance to correct my mistakes 8 years before I turned 50. So I had at least 8 years to learn my lessons from the last 42 years. If I didn't figure out how to correct my mistakes, then I would be subjected to declining from the mistakes I made the last 50 years. But now I have a chance to correct all the mistakes I've made the last 50 years, and it's painful. And some things I forget I even had an injury or something else, but I think the major injuries and even the minor ones finally came to surface every single time the climate changed. And that was within the last 3 years. And then I woke up the demons ever since 2016. That was the whole J-Juice world, was waking up people's demons. I didn't realize it was really deep, because I was like, oh, wow. At first it was a superficial, change that I was so astonished that I lost a bunch of weight. But there was a lot more that I had to deal with. And so Dr. Leonard Hayflick discovered that you have mortal somatic cells that can only redouble itself at least 50 times over before it converts over to the next immortalized germline cell to develop another downline, assuming you don't have too much damage from the last somatic cells attempting to redouble itself. Everybody has an immortalized germline cells, and that's what cancer is, but that's supposed to be a transition between the old world and the new world. But if you're declining so much, then the old world will die, but the new world hasn't been able to transition correctly. That's cancer. And so the infrastructure breaks down when the new world tries to take over. That's cancer. And the old world doesn't give it the platform to do that. Okay? And so that's what's going on right now, is we have all these generations living amongst each other. And so we have the boomers that are basically dying off with their belief systems, and they're very rigid in how they, project their belief systems. And then you have the millennials who are trying to be a little bit different, but they're still adopting their parents' ways of doing stuff. And you have the Gen X that was raised differently or raised the same, and so they're kind of crapshoots. Then we have the Gen Z that are kind of like, the last little bit residual of the genetic line, and then they're going to be hot chicks and hot guys screwing each other in Babylon, when you think about it, until they are done, because they're going to be infertile, but they'll have fun on their way out the door. And that's kind of how the system is constructed. It's like the Russian nesting dolls. We're at the last little bit of the Russian nesting dolls. And so the hot chicks and the hot girls and the fertile girls and the ones that are being forced into marriage and having children, eventually they're going to destroy their own genetic line from so much procreation and so much of the pleasure and paradise that they screw themselves to death, and they're done. And their children don't survive because their children are so in deficit. And that's what we're kind of seeing right now. Okay? And so, And so that's why people get oncology to destroy the new world, but the old world is declining, so you don't get the pleasure of transitioning. You are just living out the rest of whatever life the old world left of the old world. That's called the aging process. People cannot transition correctly. It's like annihilating the civilization to attempt to rebuild, but you can't have the tools. But you don't have the tools to do that because you've annihilated the civilization. There must be a stable transition from the old world and the new world, and people don't know how to do that. And so the last 8 years was me transitioning from the old world and getting so much resistance, hatred, stalkers, mean people, nasty emails, death threats, judgments and cases and all this other shit. And then I'm having to figure out, how do I develop a new world that comes from an old world that's so resistant to change? Well, you got to be a fucking strong person and weather the battle and the storms of people throwing grenades at you, people mischaracterizing you. And it takes a very fucking strong person to do that, okay? And especially to deal with the pain and suffering. And try to remind people, I'm not the enemy here, okay? I'm not the enemy here. You've made your choices. Even after the world changed for you, you still made your choices. And you chose to blame, and you don't have the capacity to change. Well, you have a way to go and blame somebody else, and that's your absolution. All right, so there's that. Yellowstone is doing whatever. Sybil. All right. Yeah, I got lucky with my husband, but I think my gut knew how to pick the right husband. He's a bad boy, but not so bad. He wasn't redeemable, but he was bad enough to be smart, and that's awesome. And then able to handle my information, sort of. But the more clean and sober you are, the better choices you'll make. Excuse me. So if you're raising kids right now, they have to be clean and sober, really. They'll go through their stuff, whatever they go through. But they're going to have to weather the storm of being rejected, weather the storm of having so many hormones are going to just drive them crazy, and they'll think it's normal until they get, regulated by somebody. And so I just, these kids are going to have to go through a lot with their peers. They're going to have to go through a lot. So, all of us are from 9/11 and 9/11 things. All right, I'm not going to read. Well, hold on. Okay, I'll read this. Yeah, I was going to read this. All right. This is what I wanted to read about. Well, I'll read that in a minute. Hold on. Oh, that's right. The image. Jeez. What is it? Yeah, micro, macro. Gosh, there's so much. Okay. God, I have so much information. All right. Freddy Krueger was born from trauma. Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees was also born from unresolved trauma. When a person finally resolves their trauma, they don't want children because they don't need something else to carry on their genetic line if they are the best copy. Can you imagine what these women who endured Epstein, Weinstein, P. Diddy, and R. Kelly having children? Can you imagine what these kids are dealing with? Even the Kardashian kids. Okay? Can you imagine what people have gone through in their life and they have children on top of that? These children are born from unresolved trauma. And that's why Instagram, OnlyFans is a place for them to go to act out their trauma they endured and was born from, or they get married to someone who acts out their 50 Shades of Grey fantasies on them. That's why I feel sorry for these girls, because they're going to be forced into a situation where they're going to have to try to survive it, and I don't know if they can. That's pretty much the future for these girls out there born from aggressive trauma. When a child is born from trauma, it's anybody's guess how the system is going to control their power, if they even can. And that's why you see generations of girls who will be used and abused because it's about being a hot girl on OnlyFans and Instagram. And then you give them money for compensation. And then you hope they don't suffer too much when they pass away. Just watch the Netflix series Too Hot to Handle. Young millennials, Gen Z, basically okay with disposing their body and getting money for it, or fame. It's fun now, but later on when the chickens come to roost, it'll be agonizing pain. If they die suddenly, it won't be agonizing, but their peers and their next of kin will be suffering. I hope the money they make and the family's fame they get is enough compensation for being brought into this world under aggressive trauma. The system knew. Okay, things were never going to be easy for Frederick Charles Krueger. As chronicled in Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, his mother, Amanda Krueger, was better known by her chosen name, Sister Mary Helena. As a nun, she worked at the Hathaway House, an asylum for the criminally deranged. A few days before Christmas 1941, Amanda found herself the victim of a merry mix-up. She was locked inside the building when the guards went home for the long weekend, leaving the high-security hospital unattended, as it is customary during the holidays. By the time she was found, she suffered a series of horrendous attacks at the hands of the inmates and was pregnant with a bastard son of 100 maniacs. So you can imagine how many sperm got into her body, got into that egg. So you can imagine then women and men with so many sexual partners, right? It's still in the body. It's still trying to find a way to become relevant. And it changes people's personalities. It does. And so that was the extreme side of what happens when women have a lot of sexual partners. And there are a lot of psychopathics out there. A lot of really unstable people out there, and they're getting with them. And they could be in religious world, they could be in any kind of world, the BDSM world, the 50 Shades of Grey world. They could be swinging out there, okay? And so Freddy Krueger was the product of 1,000 maniacs. The bastard son of 100 maniacs. I said 10,000. But when you think about how many sexual partners women have, and then they have a kid on top of that, yeah, you can only imagine. You can only imagine what's going to come up from that. And so dying for fame and family and fornication ends up in aggressive frequency. Fame and family. See, there's definitely a connection there. Oh, yeah. I'm not going to say that. Oh, okay. So what society does to its children, so will its children do to a society. So now you can see a society. And an intellectual is someone whose mind watches itself. I like this because I am happy to be both halves, the watcher and the watched. That was from, who was that from? Albert Camus. And it's learn how to use both sides of your brain. So I learned how to use both sides of my brain. I can learn the details that make up the big picture. But it's painful to wake up the side of the brain that was atrophied due to cures and detoxes and starvation and surgeries. What we do to children in the medical holistic energy healing world is what the children will turn into adults. Is what is children who turn into adults do to society. And we have a lot of domestic violence, sexual predation, criminals in the justice system because of what we've done to them as children. Even simply getting an operation is doing harm. But the ends justify the means, and the ends are all based upon what you ultimately expect from that situation. It doesn't mean that it was good for the body in the long run. It was just a short-term stay of execution. Eventually, you're going to have to pay the piper. So when you get an operation as a kid, for whatever reason, and maybe justifiable because of something, or maybe you get braces and you gotten teeth pulled out, and you may have to relive some of that pain and suffering. I don't know. I've never had my teeth pulled out. I think when I did all that kombucha and I was at that telemarketing company and I felt the top tooth of my bottom of my mouth crumble, it's because all that sugar that I was exposing myself to because I was drinking so much probiotic. But what I needed was the salt and the nutrition. So I was almost basically crumbling, rotting my mouth out with the sugar kombucha. So, but that was pretty much the center of that situation. And so anyways, so I was lucky enough not to have undergo any major surgeries. And so, but I can imagine someone has gone through surgeries and dental issues that they're going to have to revisit some of that stuff. And so what did Maxim Gorky say? A good man can be stupid and still be good, but a bad man must have brains. How bad is bad? Well, there you go. And that's why women like bad boys, because but you became too bad, but you become too bad, you could be a destroyer. And so here's the thing, it's my advice. See, the reason why cult leaders are geniuses because they're able to manipulate people. That's what genius is. It's manipulating the surroundings to make it work for your benefit. But you can use your power for evil, not for good. And that's the thing about genius and cult and criminality. All those criminals in jail are probably geniuses on some level, and some of them, just can't handle their emotions. And so they react at the drop of a dime because that's how they're trained on the streets. But there's some criminal genius out there that found a way to escape the law, and then they develop cults and followings and activism and stuff like that. But they're working within the confines of the law. But I mean, they're in shades of gray, playing 50 Shades of Grey. But when you have that ability to manipulate your own body to make it work for your benefit, whatever it is, you don't want to have a cult following, because once you have people that love you, that you have to cater to, you get corrupted. That's why I didn't want people to love me. I didn't want people really to follow me. I didn't like all the lavish praise and the kissing of the ass and all that stuff. I didn't like, and I can feel it, and it didn't sit right with me. The empathics and love and kindness people, it didn't sit right with me, because it was a cult mentality that was misusing the power they had. Even though I know we've been trained to do that, be all about love and kindness, because that's how the system's able to channel the powers that we have, so it wasn't so destructive. But if it was destructive, it would be through a contractual agreement with someone who said yes to whatever it is that you wanted. So if you have a marriage, about love and kindness and everything else, and you sign on the dotted line that you're married to this person, now you got to negotiate your survival. And you've chosen to be in that situation. No one forced you in that situation. So then you have to negotiate your survival with that person you're in a contractual relationship with. So that's how the system channeled our powers. Whether in sports, in marriage, OnlyFans, Instagram, legal prostitution. I don't even know if, but anyone that forces you into something that is against your will, that's illegal. So the system has to find a ways to channel the power that you have, so it's something that you're saying yes to until you say no. Until you say, okay, boundaries. That was very strategic of Tavistock, the CIA, the FBI, all that. Those people are fucking strategic, and I thank you for finally me seeing that, but giving me the allowance to work it out, to tease out that revelation. All right? So cult leaders of the past were geniuses, because how do you get a bunch of people to follow you? Be a leader, but have zero followers you need validation from. Have followers that hate you because you took the other side because you had to, and you had to learn both sides of the argument, and then you stopped taking sides. How do you get followers who only know how to take one side or the others to follow you? You won't ever. You'll never have... If you don't want to be a really bad cult leader, or the others don't follow. See, that's the thing. How do you get followers who only know how to take one side or the other to follow you? You won't ever. That's my world. What I'm basically saying is it's not really very clear, but I'm trying to work this out in my head. But if you want to be an ethical, moral person, you won't take a side. Because as soon as you take a side, you will have followers of people. And so don't ever sell out to the system of taking sides. They do it in the politics, religion, and science because it's a manipulation, and they have a strategy that you don't understand. And so if you don't take a side, you'll never have a following, and you won't become a corrupt leader getting drunk with power. Nope, you also won't get a lot of glorified followers who don't understand another person's point of views. Okay, I know it sounds kind of confusing. Let me tell you, it's difficult to really break through the brainwashing of the system. You won't get people to like you when you don't take a side they expect you to take. In my opinion, never be a leader to people who love you, because you'll become corrupt. Look at how many people who follow icons of the past, and they use their power to manipulate and destroy and justify abuse. Like the Pied Piper leading the rats into the water. And see, so the perspective that I was coming from, how do you get followers who only know how to take one side or the other to follow you? You won't ever. So someone like me who doesn't take a side, you can't get people who take one side or the other to follow you, because you're not taking a side, so you won't ever. Okay? So that's why I don't want to be loved. And if you hate me, leave me alone. Okay? I don't even demand respect, because that must be earned based upon someone's expectations. Just be polite. Be polite to the people in your society. In my opinion, I wouldn't be kind and generous, because then you're just manipulating people's feelings so you can get something from them. Even feeling of power, because you're trying to destroy them. What do you mean trying to destroy them? Why are you trying to cultivate a relationship with somebody? Because you want something from them. How much do you want from them? Do you know your boundaries? Can you even watch yourself taking from somebody? Watching yourself asking somebody for something all the time. And that's the thing. And so that's a type of destruction. It's a corruption. Anytime you interact with anyone, it's a type of corruption. But it must be, consent. Okay, you must give consent to be corrupted by someone. You must be the one to invite someone. That's the thing with the whole vampires, right? How you get destroyed by vampires, because you invite them into your house. You invite them into your body. You invite them into your spirit. You invite them into your politics, religion, science. Okay, you invite them into your mind. And so, in my opinion, I wouldn't be kind and generous, because then you're just manipulating people's feelings so you can get something from them, even a feeling of power, because you're trying to destroy them. And a discerning person would feel that inauthenticity. Someone who is not in touch with their gut would believe the superficial bullshit people spoon feed each other and strangers. And it's a brainwashing when someone says a very general statement that if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. That's a logical fallacy that the premise assumes the conclusion. It's not even a specified premise. It is so open to interpretation that any politics, religion, or scientific dogma could use that statement to manipulate someone into believing or taking a stand for their argument and their belief system. So you see those in the anti-V world. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And they'll use that in politics. They'll use that in Democrat, Republican, anti-V, pro-V, anti-GMO, pro-GMO, religion, Yeshua, Jesus, Muslim, and you name it, someone will use that statement, because that's how they get people to be like, oh, I'll stand for you then. I'll stand for what your beliefs. And then they become a clone. They become the Agent Smith. Smith is such a nondescript, such an American nondescript name. Smith, Mr. Smith, Mr. Smith, Mr. Jones, Mr. Brown, right? Mr. Smith, Jones, and Brown. That's so American. So many Smiths, so many Jones, so many Browns. Mr. Anderson is then, Matrix dude. So what the hell is something and what the hell is anything? That's a whole lot of nothing with nothing specific. So you can only imagine how many nouns and pronouns and people, places, and things people will stand for so they don't fall for anything. Then you get chaos. So, anyway, so there's that. Oh yeah, and then image. See, when I was studying the physics a few years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I was writing so much about the subatomic particles, trying to figure out protons, neutrons, electrons, and how that works with cells, and what's a cure, and what does the salt do when a person gets so many electrons, electron for electron, and then the excessive electrons spill over to the next one and then activates another cell. So you get cured here with all the salts, and it also brings in, stuff, or it can fly things apart, just depends. So when you have so much electron for electron in one cell, that's called cure, but then the excessive electrons that spill over to the next cell becomes then a chaos. So you get a cure, a chaos, a cure, and a chaos. And that's what salt, that's the ionization of salt, is the cure, chaos effect. And so the cured people in the J world love me. The chaos people didn't like me, and those were on the Dr. Phil show. But the girls that liked me on my end, they were getting cured, but the girls across from me and the guy across from me, they were getting chaos. And so then you have that whole thing of balancing of powers, and try not to get caught up in the emotions of it and the mischaracterization and the assumptions, what people do. That's what TV shows do. But that's what the subatomic particles and electrons and protons and neutrons, that's what they're all trying to show you, is all the atomic energy, the colliding of atoms. And so image, I figured out with the acronym back then, was electrical impulses, matter, gases, and acids. And so image, every single one of you are a bunch of quarks and leptons in an organized infrastructure with an intention and a story. So then you have the alphanumeric codes, which is basically putting words together. And even these words have different contexts. So you can have the noun, the pronoun, an adjective, an adverb. And so you can have someone like Trump. Let me tell you another example. Again, how you can have one word like Trump have so many different contexts and meanings. You have Trump as a pronoun, Trump, and being trumped as an adjective, or I'm gonna trump you, that could be like, a verb. And so you could have so many contexts to one word. And so that's where you get so many different meanings. And if you understand context, understand spells, and understand the English language and the parts of speech and what modifies what, and that's the diagram and sentences that I learned back in third grade, actually, then some people will just learn one context with one belief that becomes so narrow. And so Trump is not just, being trumped and being bamboozled. It's just, to them, it's just worshiping a savior. But they don't realize that Trump also has another context to it that some people don't want to face. And I understand that. But that's understanding there's so many other worlds, so many other contexts to work from and live from. And that's alphanumeric code. That's generating scripts. Gene generation. Gene generates scripts. And so image is electrical impulses, matter, gases, and acids. So gases, okay, that's all chemistry. Acids, amino acids and whatever else. And then, electrical impulses. It's the energy colliding. It's the electricity. It's the zero. That's why I had the zero and the A, B, C, D, E, F, G all the way to zero, because that's the micro. And then you have all the different, formulas and alphanumeric type of stuff. And then you have the macro, and then the micro, and the macro, the micro, and it ends up in the micro, because eventually, you have an organization. So you have the micro developing an organization infrastructure, and that's the macro, and that's your world, and that's person, that's organisms. And then you have the micro, and that when it goes into chaos, into entropy, when people want to stay the same, and then the environment doesn't allow them to stay the same, and they break apart. That's called thermodynamics. Okay, and that's Newtonian physics. That is so many different formulas within physics, and that's that's like Einstein's theory of relativity. It's all relative, special relativity, the inverse square laws, and there's so much geometry, and what else? Integers, and so electrical impulses, matter, gas, and acids, developing a universe and a constellation of images and sounds and smells. That's the macro. Understand the micro, and then the micro eventually turns into the macro. As of this writing, quarks and leptons are the smallest known building blocks of nature, and they are very small indeed. The most powerful instrumentation can see objects smaller than a proton, but quarks and leptons are too small to directly image with modern equipment. And so then also got M.C. Escher and that picture of the hand drawing itself. Well, something else had to exist as a hand to help the other hand draw itself. So Drawing Hands is a lithograph by the Dutch artist M.C. Escher, first printed in January 1948. My dad, at his office, my mother bought him a picture of M.C. Escher, but it was a different picture, but it was in the background of his office. Okay, so she understood the power of M.C. Escher. And so M.C. Escher first printed in January 1948. It depicts a sheet of paper out of which two hands rise in the paradoxical act of drawing one another into existence. This is one of the most obvious examples of Escher's common use of paradox. All right? So we all can bring something into existence. It's how we put words together, numbers, everything. Okay? And following codes and laws. And so there's that. And then that's right, the concentric circle. So I was trying to explain maybe in my last book. I haven't looked at my last book in a while. That was like a couple of years ago. So that's way in the past to me. But the concentric circles. And so when you see how a community, a civilization is developed, you have your central government, right? Your offices of government in the middle. And then outside is then your businesses, industries and businesses. So you look at my town in Canton, Ohio. So you have your centralized government, you have your businesses, your law enforcement, your industry, and then outside you have your neighborhoods, and then you have even the suburbs. And outside of that, maybe you have agriculture, and outside of that, maybe you have bigger industries that can't, be put into the middle of the inner city. And those are concentric circles. Okay. And so then image alphanumeric code 0 to A, B, C, D, F, G, all the way to Y, X, Y, and then 0. Z. 0 is the invisible hand. See, think about it. 0 is the beginning and 0 is the end. So that's why a whole thing, that's just interesting. That's Freudian because I didn't put Z, I put 0. 0, Z, what the hell? Yeah, holy shit. 0 is the invisible hand. The energy that you can't see are causing the chemical reactions of atoms, which are colliding with each other. You call 0 of that energy God if you want, but there's also a master plan. Who's the master of that plan? Those who have already understood how the universe works, and they just keep the programs running, but shapeshift the intentions and the outcome. It's not that difficult to manipulate your own environment as well as the environment in between each concentric circle. There's always a code to keep everything uniform with no chaos. Don't work outside of the code, and don't break the code or you'll get chaos or even go to jail. So the 10 commandments are codes. Now, they can be left to interpretation, but that shall not steal, that shall not commit adultery, that shall not covet thy neighbor's ass or wife. Okay. And there's more to that. But sometimes, that's right, eye for an eye or something. I don't remember all the 10 commandments. There's always a code to keep everything uniform with no chaos. Don't work outside the code and don't break the code or you'll get chaos or even go to jail. Okay? And so image of civilization developed by mankind. Heaven and hell. Song by Black Sabbath. Sing me a song, you're a singer. Do me wrong, you're a bringer of evil. The devil is never a maker. The less that you give, you are a taker. So it's on and on and on. That's heaven and hell. All right? And so the devil is never a maker. The lessons that you give, you're a taker. All right. Well, that's true. You give something, you're taking. And so heaven and hell. Yeah. The lover of life's not a sinner. The lover of life's not a sinner. The ending is just the beginning. The closer you get to the meaning, the sooner you'll know that you're dreaming. So it's on and on and on. And that's the thing. These circles can go on forever and ever and ever and ever. And it's like, it's such a paradox of give and take, such a paradox of oxymorons too. Irony. And so, so I said that, okay, sorry. I'm going down, I should be going up. And then about judgments, whatever. You keep people around you that are in conflict with you, but you don't ever overstep your boundaries. But you always, always want to keep people who have different thought processes, because eventually you might even see where they're coming from. I'm not good down that. Yeah. All right. So the background of Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers, and Freddy Krueger. Okay. So all of us are full of so many mini 9/11 events we had to survive, and some were so aggressive that we forget what kind of damage that was done to us, or the damage we've done to ourselves because of situations we've blocked out until we feel it later on when we allow ourselves to. And the reason why we don't remember some of these really major aggressive events, because it's a type of protective mechanism the brain has, and it becomes your alter ego. It's a type of dissociation through dissociative disorders, usually are connected to something really aggressive like MK Ultra events that people read about. But sometimes you could have dissociation disorders develop from a breakup because of your inability to handle stress. So you can only imagine that we've, the brutality even back in the Iran-Iraq war and over there in in Kuwait or Abu Ghraib, what these guys went through. They went through a dissociation. They went through some torture, and maybe they became better for it. Maybe they didn't. Who knows? Okay, you don't know what happened to all these guys that went through all these different tortures type of things, but they did that even in the Middle Ages. Which is why, and even on Bridgerton, the last episode, the last season, where the prince was going through some torture and the queen just couldn't handle it after he's been through so much. He was getting like hot water or cold water or something done to him, or he was getting hit, I don't know. But that was expanding his capacity to feel and bring up the fight or flight hormone. I mean, it's brutal, yeah, and it has to be done in a way that doesn't destroy the person, but you know how shit goes. Sometimes the experiments are done through war, justified through war, and then blamed on people. But some people are like, they're like the Stanford experiment. They're put in positions of power over somebody else, and they do brutal things. Will that person survive it? Will they not? Will they channel that power of somebody hurting them into something constructive and innovative? I mean, I can't say it's right or wrong. It's just, fuck. It's just what it is. All right? And so, which is why some of these women don't survive breaking up with their boyfriends, because their boyfriends become so obsessed they can't handle being rejected. It's like the end of their world. Then you get murder-suicide events because people cannot handle the stress. So you see all over Daily Mail, a dad annihilates his family. Chris Watts was the beginning of family annihilation. I mean, it wasn't the beginning. It was just going to ramp up because some people cannot handle having children. They can't handle a family. It's too stressful for them, which is why addiction is so rampant in America, because we've all come from some kind of trauma and corruption within the family. But that was part of the larger scale experiments, was trauma and trauma-based programming, and sometimes it's political events and elections, and then crazy riots and activism and pandemics. These are the stories of what happens when we develop children from trauma, when we try to overprotect our children, when we raise our children in cults, when boys and girls cannot manage and handle rejection or a traumatic event or a loss in a game or a breakup. So you can imagine the Phoenixes, River Phoenix and Leaf Phoenix and the Phoenix, they were raised in a cult. And then River Phoenix couldn't survive his background, and so he ended up dead over there at the Viper Room, and Leaf Phoenix ended up being a star. I don't know what happened to his sister, but they're channeling all of that trauma through the cults they were raised in, which I get it, okay, and all the drugs and all the fame and the fortune and all that stuff. Then they channeled all of that anxiety, all of that energy, that power into their craft. That's what Hollywood is. It's taking the power of trauma, the power of whatever that was developed in them through so many different means, and they channel it through innovation. But then you can also have a society of crawling with demons because they can't handle that trauma. They could not survive it. And so sometimes men and women and boys and girls go off the deep end. They can't handle the pain and suffering, and then they stuff it deep down inside, and then one day it manifests into something deadly. All of us will deal with our own 9/11 events regarding somebody or something, or whether it's a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a best friend or a mother and a father, and you hope they don't die from that major event, and you hope they channel those feelings and issues into writing, reading, maybe studying and learning, but not finding another person to get lost into, because they may not survive that person. And violence and getting lost in a bar fight is not a way to channel those traumatic feelings, because one day, if you ever decide to face the past, you're going to have to pay for those feelings and damage to your body, and it will be so painful. It will be so painful. So the 1980s slasher movies was an allegory and a mirror showing you what happens when we have families developing children from trauma and ineffective reactions to situations out of their control. And children who don't know how to manage their feelings and release the demons in a proper, effective venue, when they are also shown violence in movies, it rewires their brains. Sometimes they become so good, but when you're so good, then you'll think everything is good around you, and then you go walk into danger, you get brutalized, you can't survive it. You'll never recover from it. Some of these kids are like that. They didn't realize how dangerous the world was really, and so they become the sweet and sour candy. They're so sweet, and then they get wind of the world, and they become sour and mean and upset. And so sometimes they become so good, and sometimes they're so traumatized, they walk into danger because they had to become numb to deal with those images, or they become the danger. Sometimes children who can't handle the loss and losing hurt themselves because they were told to be perfect. So much pressure to outperform their peers and be perfect. And then they're not, and they can't handle it. The pressure of being perfect and good can be deadly. The drive to succeed is so great to a point that it can be abused, especially when children are under the type of pressure, especially now with the climate change and declining bodies. And so that kid that was forced to go and run on the treadmill because his dad thought he was too fat, he tortured his kid to death. He literally tortured his kid to death. How many parents out there go play baseball or soccer or football, and they are torturing their sons and daughters into being the best, and they become the abusive parent on the sidelines? And they show you that in some of these movies. Jason Voorhees, Friday the 13th, right? Jason Voorhees is a character from Friday the 13th franchise with a complex backstory that includes physical deformities, a medical condition, and the death of his mother. Now you can imagine with Hitler what he dealt with. When his mother was dying from breast cancer, he had a brutal father, and then he became a dictator and a destroyer. So childhood of Jason Voorhees. Jason was born with physical deformities and an unnamed medical condition in the 1940s. See, all this stuff happened in the 1940s, right? His single mother, Pamela, was also a recent widow and did everything she could to protect her son from a world that might ostracize him. She kept him home, homeschooled him. Now look at these kids being homeschooled, right? She kept him home, homeschooled him, and limited his exposure to other people in Crystal Lake. Camp Crystal Lake. In 1958, Jason was 11 years old when he was thought to have drowned at Camp Crystal Lake after 2 counselors left the boys unattended. Pamela blamed the counselors for her son's death and killed them, which led to the closure of the camp. Survival. However, Jason actually survived and became a hermit in the woods, living off of plants, bugs, and animals. Some say he returned to life to avenge his mother's death. Jason grew up to be a large, uneducated, and deformed man who never spoke. And we have those in the population. Those are the Norman Bates out there, right? People that are silent but deadly. Oh, yeah. Halloween. Michael Myers' backstory begins on Halloween night of 1963 when the 6-year-old stabs and kills his 15-year-old sister, Judith, in their suburban Haddonfield, Illinois home. Oh, the Midwest, right? Before his parents arrive, the story of Michael and Judith become local legend. Michael is then institutionalized at Smith Grove Sanitarium, where he spends his childhood and adolescence under the observation of his psychiatrist, Dr. Samuel Loomis. Loomis becomes an expert on Michael, eventually calling him the personification of evil. 15 years later, on Halloween night in 1978, Michael escapes from the sanitarium and returns to Haddonfield, where he stalks and murders a teenage babysitter named Laurie Strode and her friends. During the course of the night, Michael also comes face to face with Laurie and Loomis. However, Halloween 2 reveals that Michael and Laurie are actually siblings. Holy shit. Wow. Michael Myers is an iconic slasher movie villain. So he kills his 15-year-old sister Judith in their suburban, and then his babysitter, and then murders where he stalks and murders a teenage babysitter named Laurie Strode. And in Halloween 2 reveals that Michael and Laurie are actually siblings. Oh, wow. Michael Myers is an iconic slasher movie villain who is rarely seen without his mask and never speaks, except in one film that explores his childhood. In the original Halloween film, he is credited as the Shape and is often referred to as the Boogeyman. So you see what the movies are trying to say, that some of these kids, like some of these foster kids, that the mother is forced to have these children, they're going into these foster homes, and you see that Netflix show of this foster mother brutalizing her freaking foster children. We are developing monsters in our society because we're all about, let's have a family, let's have children. And then these kids are not well taken care of. They're 15-year-old teenage mothers. And then you have someone like Charles Manson, to a teenage mother, I guess, who's on the streets, prostitute or something else. And then he goes into institutions. Yeah. So if you want to get all pissy at the system, like, you develop these crazy killers. No. How many kids out there are developed from teenage moms or from mothers that couldn't handle it? Couldn't handle raising a kid. She has her own issues. Forced to have that child. Couldn't get an abortion. So now that kid is subject to some brutality in the population because the system has to now take care of them. And the system can't vet out all these foster parents. They can't vet out everybody. There's shit goes on that you don't even know about because you don't know 10 years later, 5 years later, that someone was locked up in the basement or caged up and tortured. That's why you're seeing all this shit on the articles. Because we have airhead mothers and airhead fathers developing children who are not well taken care of, who have mental issues, cognitive issues, emotional issues. They grow up so overprotected or underprotected, they get brutalized and they turn into a crawling demon that then put on a mask and a face. They're like a Ted Bundy, charming the pants off of women around them, charming the pants off the men around them. And then they get in and they destroy. They're not always kicking your ass. They're coming in with charm, with a good paper, what looks good on paper. But whatever, what are you going to fucking do? You can't tell people anything. You can't tell people anything. But you can only watch. You can only watch. and be like, told you so, told you so, told you so. But then, you're far away from everybody. I don't hang out with people. I don't get involved with people's kids. I don't try to be a do-gooder. Because the thing is, you don't know what you're dealing with out there. And I get, men will do what men will do, and they hang out with their guys and help each other, whatever, fine. You can handle it, fine. But I, as a woman, I'm not babysitting anybody's kids. I'm not a nanny anymore. I'm not even talking to people on Facebook. I don't influence anybody. Because then, that's a source of manipulation. Trying to tell people how to live, no. But you're going to find that the right wing, when they're all about family, they're developing a Jason Voorhees, they're developing a Michael Myers, they're developing a Freddy Krueger, and then you look at these girls that were brutalized by Epstein, Weinstein, R. Kelly, P. Diddy, allegedly. And now they're with these good guys, but now they have all that sperm in their body. All that psychopathic 10,000 maniac sperm in their body. What kind of kids are being produced from that? Regardless of whoever the actual father is at the time, there's sperm fighting to get that egg in the body. But see, the system had to show you, the system had to let that play out. So you had to see it. And then the movies confirm what happens in real life. And then you look in your community. So you have the movies, what happens in real life, like the Hollywood people. And then you go look at your friends and family. You look at all the people that are dealing with stuff, hiding behind the drugs, the alcohol, the sex, the big families, trying to come off like a moral, trying to go up on their moral high ground. Oh, I'm such a, a good person. Yeah. But you had to see it. But I felt the last few months, all the memories of the bad choices I made. And thank gosh I did not have children. Thank you, the people in the past, whether it was Leslie a long time ago, helped me out in that situation. She's like, after I had that abortion, she's like, okay, you need to get an OR plan. Because if you're going to have sex with somebody, you might as well have something to stop you from having a baby. Because I probably would have died. I probably would have died from having that baby. I probably would have died early. You've seen that 16-year-old that was a teenage, pregnant, whatever that is, teenage girl, got pregnant, 16 years old, and she dies at 27. The earlier you have kids, the sooner you'll die. The faster you mature, the sooner you will die. These kids are maturing faster, they're sexualized earlier, and they're dying earlier. Just now look people around you. Look at everything that's going on around you. And I hope you have what it takes to face your past. And if you don't, I'm so sorry. Don't follow me because I'll make you feel bad. And I don't mean to, but this is for people who can handle facing the past and their demons. Others can't. I can't help it. Sorry. But that's all I'm going to say for now, I think. Yeah, so good luck. But I feel great. I feel great. I feel wonderful. And I got my eyesight back. That's what's really freaking amazing. All right, but you got to fight for it. Nothing ever happens overnight. What happened for me with my eyesight getting back was like 8 years of battles. 8 years.